Welcome in to the Bro 4 Squad podcast, where we are just a bunch of bros drinking beer and talking movies. I am your host, the Mayor Jeff Hornacek, and this is our spoilers review. Excuse me. I just got out of a trap where my tongue was strapped to something. I can't speak. Of Spiral from the Book of Saw. Now, the actual title just says Spiral, but from the Book of Saw has popped up a lot of places. I am joined, of course, by our legal counsel, Ronnie Cycli, to review this on the 5 Bro 4 Squad criteria for all of our reviews, which is the acting, the story, our favorite scene, the impact of the movie, and then its rewatchability. So, Cycli, this is our return to theaters, and we were not going to miss another entry in the Saw franchise. How did you feel about the acting and performances in Spiral? Because I think we can say, if anything, having Chris Rock and Samuel L. Jackson cast in this, more actor cachet than we've ever had, even close to, in a Saw film.
Yeah, absolutely. This was one of the things you and I talked about in the build-up the last few years, was if they're ever going to bring back the franchise, they have to do something extra for us, right? They can't just keep doing what they've been doing. And then bringing Chris Rock, talking about how he was a fan of the franchise, tagging Samuel L. Jackson, immediately your first thought is, oh my God, what do they have planned for us? This is, they're not going to get some A-list actors now. If there's not something decent planned. And I will say this is probably going to be spoiler heavy because it's going to be hard to do a Saw review without it. But in terms of the acting, I'm going to say Chris Rock to me was completely underwhelming, unfortunately. I wasn't sure if he was just kind of, he didn't take the role that seriously. They told us what fans he was. It just didn't feel like he was really there. Or maybe he just really never played that type of character and it was a struggle for him. I'm not sure. But I was underwhelmed by him. It didn't feel believable. I did feel like Samuel L. Jackson was just Samuel L. Jackson. I don't think Samuel L. Jackson
at this point, that's all he can do, right? And he's an icon in cinema, but he's Samuel L. Jackson,
The last movie I can think where he truly acted, and again, I could be wrong on this. I don't have his whole filmography in front of me, but it has to be Django Unchained.
I was going to say Django, yeah.
That's the last time I'm like, he played a different character. He had to do a different accent. He had to do, different mannerisms. He's just like, you want to play games, motherfucker? Like, I mean, who doesn't love Samuel L. Jackson saying motherfucker? But, he was in there for what? The sake of getting in there. Plus, he was in 2 trailers before the movie. Like, so he is just in every movie now, just being himself, which props to him. But I did feel like the rest of the cast actually was very strong. Usually Saw has always struggled in the overacting or just that type of actors they can get for these movies. I thought the guy who played William Shank he did a great job. We'll talk about his character. But I thought him and the captain, who I believe was Marcel Nicholas, Angie Garza, she was fine. Like, I thought the rest of the supporting cast was actually better. So, what about you?
Yeah, I agree. I think the ancillary characters typically have kind of been a weak point in this film, or in this franchise. But they really stepped up. I love Max Minghella, and obviously what they do with Shank we'll discuss here in a little bit, whether we like it or not. But Richard Zeppieri, who played Detective Fitch, I mean, it's a tough role to play the douchebag cop that you're supposed to hate and not have it feel like, all right, dude, really? But he was good, and I'll just say this about Chris Rock.
Didn't he look like Joe Pesci or something like that?
I was kind of getting vibes or he looked like any throwaway character in Batman Begins, who's like one of the corrupt cops. Like, he probably read for one of those roles, and they were like, well, hey, your part in Hollywood will come around. Just, it's not this.
He's been typecast as a corrupt cop.
Now, the thing that's kind of frustrating me on IMDb, like the way that the cast list is billed is very odd. Like, I'm going through the first 20 people, and I can't find the guy who played Sam, who was Zeke's old partner. So if someone at home knows his name, again, we're not priding ourselves on our research. I thought he was pretty good too, and he plays an important character in the film. Last thing I'll say, because you kind of hit the nail on the head perfectly with Chris Rock and Samuel L. Jackson, I think Chris Rock is very enjoyable in this film, and he's very entertaining. But because he's Chris Rock and the performance he's giving completely takes me out of the movie.
I think it's his eye. There's something about his eyes are kind of dead in the film. Like, I like his script. I like how his character was written. His acting was genuinely probably fine. There was something just behind the eyes that just was like, I'm not really into this.
And even though it may, on the surface, you may be like, oh, he's really important to the plot. I think his dad, Detective Marcus Banks, is completely superfluous in this movie. You could take him out of it, and it would be the exact same thing.
It was an excuse to get Samuel L. Jackson in the movie.
Yeah. So I'm not trying to sit here and shit on the cast. I'm actually pumped that we got big names like this in the
Yeah.
Saw franchise. We'll talk about whether this is actually the Saw franchise in a little bit, but I don't know. It just we wanted them to do something new with the series, but this felt like so far removed from anything that was Saw-like in terms of the performances, which to some people maybe they really enjoyed it. For me, I wasn't angry at it, but it just did not feel like the experience I thought I was going to have.
No, I say underwhelming is the perfect description.
Yeah. All right, on to the story and the plot. So, according to IMDb, the synopsis is a criminal mastermind unleashes a twisted form of justice in Spiral, the terrifying new chapter from the Book of Saw. Cycling, I'll put the spoilers tag up top in the title of this movie. So, if you have not seen Spiral, pause us, go to the movie theater for 2 hours, come back. What did you think of the story here? Because, as we know, this is what has carried the Saw franchise across now 9 films. Is its
Yeah,
story?
I think I actually didn't mind the story. I again going back to a movie that's now 9 films deep. If you want to relate these to the Saw movies, um, we've always had these like kind of corrupt cops, and that's kind of the story of the second one, right? Where you know, he's taking his corrupt cop. He always lies. He's arrested all these people. He puts them in the house, and they're all were victims of this one specific corrupt cop. But I did feel like it was fresh, at least for a while in the film. The concept that there was this department has just been overrun with corruption, and it got back to me was the true Saw point where he genuinely in the beginning of the movies would attack people who were hurting themselves or hurting their community when they had abilities to fix it. Um, and this movie went back to that. It kind of felt like he was attacking people who, like the police, who could be doing better. So I like that part of the story. And obviously Chris Rock being one of the good few cops, quote unquote. I enjoyed that part. So before we get into how the movie really plays out, what about you?
I agree. I actually thought that, I mean, one thing Saw has always done because they've had such tight run times is everything always feels like it moves very quickly, which I think feeds sort of symbiotically into setting up these twists because the dominoes fall so fast you don't really have time to sit here and analyze them and see things coming. Although that does kind of fall apart at the beginning of the third act here. But to me, this did feel like a sort of a different take. I feel like we had cops that were much different from the ones we've seen before, where even like the ones we love and Strom and Rig and Kerry Russell's character. I can't remember her name for some reason, but they were still kind of one note and very, very predictable in the way they acted. And here Zeke and Shank did kind of feel like a different dynamic than we've had before. So I was enjoying that. And until we see where it plays out, I was even kind of enjoying the fresh take on Jigsaw. And I did think that they did a pretty good job pretty early on. I think we assumed this was going to happen, but of ruling out like this is not John Kramer, guys. Okay.
Yeah.
He is definitively dead. Like there's no twin brother out there or like Weekend at Bernie's.
He was cloned.
Thank God they haven't gone that route. So that was cool because we've always said, I mean, this series lends itself to a copycat killer some point down the road perfectly. I don't think it was executed very well here, but for the first 2 acts, I was definitely intrigued and definitely glad to be back in the theaters.
And this was the most, I mean, cop heavy storyline since since Saw 4, right? He is the main character in Saw 4. There's always cop overlapping the stories, like you said, with Strom or Hoffman. But yeah, all of a sudden you just get the full immersion with what this cop has been going through. Rig was obviously someone who had lost his family, like lost his friends due to Jigsaw. Chris Rock character was ostracized for the other reasons, not because he was losing people around him, because he lost the trust because they viewed him as a rat. But yeah, and then we get to the third act.
Yeah. So do you want to save that for impact?
Yeah,
do you want to go
probably.
Okay, perfect.
Yeah.
All right. I don't have anything else on story. If you want to go to best scene.
Yeah, sure.
All right. What was your favorite scene? Or I think it's always fair to ask in the Saw movies. If it's not a scene, was there a particular trap that you liked? Because even you saw this movie before I did, and in a non-spoilers way, you informed me, like, regardless of what you think of the film, the traps are pretty cool.
Yeah, that to me is the most standout. We'll talk about that on Impact, but the traps themselves were the most redeeming part of the movie, because what happened at the end of the Saw franchise, like, even arguably like 4 and on, was that the traps started being just a little crazy. It started being like James Bond-esque.
Saw 3D is insane. Like the budget that The Jigsaw would have had to put the one with the motorcycle.
Yeah, it's absolutely. I mean, you're getting to the CIA and MI6 type levels of like, okay, get us back down to some realism. And all of the traps in Spiral to me were very just simplistic. And that's not mean that you're not complex traps. That just means in the standard of what's occurring. And so in my best scene, it really is to me the opening scene. It opens at 4th of July, crowded area, people walking around, bumping into people. You don't know who anyone is. And it leads to the tongue trap. And it again goes back to the original Saw theme of the traps are symbolic of the crimes or sins the people in the traps have committed. And obviously you have a cop who lies on the witness stand and literally just is hanging by his tongue and can choose to rip his own tongue out to survive. A simplistic, right? Simple idea in practice. Obviously horrible in actual in when you have to do it. But I just thought that opening scene, that sequence was fantastic. It's one of the better. Saw's always had good openings, always trap openings. That one I was really excited about. Led into the next scene, which I love too, which was when Chris Rock is undercover at the hotel. I felt genuinely like, okay, I see how it's related to Saw. Obviously, you're getting the traps, but this is something new. This is something exciting.
Definitely.
I love the opening 10 minutes.
We've never had a cop as charismatic as him in the franchise, which I know I kind of talk out of both sides of my mouth here, but I think that it needed something like that. Chris Rock, I love him as a performer, but I just see Chris Rock.
And the Forrest Gump part was so Chris Rock, right? Like he's like talking about like only had sex with him. Yeah, and so but again at that moment I'm like, this is what they needed. We needed something slightly different. I just think the opening it's hard because they all kind of ran together really smoothly, which usually Saw doesn't have good transition cuts.
Right.
The opening sequence was definitely for me the best.
I agree. It is kind of crazy though when you think about like the way the traps evolved throughout the franchise. Like the very first one is literally just a dude chained to a pipe with a hacksaw in a room, and then we end up getting, I think in Jigsaw, he like takes an entire grain elevator and like hollows it out. Like months and months of construction.
Who's funding this?
Goes into it. I'm not gonna lie, some taxpayer dollars have been funneled into this project.
Yeah, I'm glad they brought it down.
My favorite scene, I'll probably have to go with this to me felt the most Saw, where like all the dominoes start to fall, things pick up, the music gets going, and you sort of see that the plot is unfolding and the killer is, no matter what, going to be one step ahead of the cops. And that's the scene where Zeke is out on that call where one of the patrol officers gets attacked by a man in a pig mask. And he starts to realize, quite literally as Jigsaw it's not Jigsaw, but the way Jigsaw always speaks to them, you're going to lose your head. Of course, is the head of their department. And Garcia goes into the cold case lab and gets attacked. And although I didn't particularly love that trap, I actually thought, or Garza, excuse me, I did just kind of love the way that it built the tension there and everything sort of fast-paced hit.
That was a fucked up trap, by the way.
That was really bad.
I mean, they're all fucked up. But come on.
That's one out there where I'd definitely be like, there is no way I'm going to sever my own spinal cord.
I don't even know if you physically can. Like, your brain's not going to allow you to,
That was ruthless.
I was like, how does that trap? I was confused by that trap too, because I didn't understand how that trap would know that you severed your spinal cord.
I don't know. Also, it's weird that as the hot wax is pouring on her, he put that little cover over her face. Like, I don't want you to get too badly burned.
Yeah, like just in case you do survive, you'll be paralyzed. So,
God,
but he really didn't like her.
No, he did not. And then when Zeke inevitably shows up and he's like, all right, well, we're definitely playing from behind in this one. And the way the music built up, and even just seeing, I did love the use of the pig mask in this movie. Seeing the pig mask in the cold case lab was pretty good imagery. So that was my favorite scene. All right, next one is Impact. So this is a big one. Obviously, we'll get into spoilers on who the killer was and then what you think it means for this franchise first. But cyclically, we'll just start it off. The ending of Saw, sort of notorious for subverting expectations or throwing some twist at us. Probably to its own detriment, we as a fan base have begun to really, really start to try and cut corners and jump in front of the twist as we're watching the film. What did you think of the twist or the resolution to Spiral? And sort of piggybacking on that, do you think this thing has legs for future installments?
So it's walking, like, leading to the twist. Obviously, nothing can replace Saw 1, right? Like, I mean, we didn't even know there was going to be a twist, and then
Yeah.
the most epic of twists. 2 was amazing because we were prepared for a twist, and they still fucking knocked it out of the park.
I think that's
3
why in a
were,
lot of ways I almost give 2 more credit because when it's like when you know a fastball's coming and you can still blow it by somebody.
yeah, absolutely, like even more respect. 3 felt underwhelming, and then you saw 4, and then that was the twist. Like, not only was there a twist in each movie, but the twist was the movies were related in terms of timeline. 5 through 7, you can argue the twists were much weaker, but there were twists, like, just be like, oh, okay, not very exciting, not redeeming of the Zepp theme. This, I will say, I'm not saying it was the worst twist in the franchise. This was the most predictable twist. With about 30 minutes to go, my wife and I both said the twist to each other. The next day, when you're seeing it, you text me right around the same time, 30 minutes left in the film. Text me exactly what you think is going to happen, begging that it doesn't. And of course, I can't respond. I'm just sitting there going, "God damn, poor guy." And again, like, I understand the, like, why they went with it. I just wish they had gone about it a different way. I think you could still end the movie like that, but sold it a little better. Obviously, having Shank, who was a kid when his son was murdered by a corrupt cop, who was, Chris Rock's partner. It was fine. Like, I got that, but it just did not deliver well. And the final scene, I didn't even know what was going on. Like, I still don't understand that trap.
I don't either.
And,
Or what he
and so,
wanted to get out of it, really.
yeah. And so, yeah, like, I don't know what legs it has to stand on, and we'll get to that rewatchability. But, I just, for me, that was so underwhelming. Why bring back a franchise? You and I always said this. If you don't have an idea, who was one of the original producers on from the beginning was James Wan, right? And
Yes.
he was tagged as an executive producer. I mean, you had
Well, Darren
everything
Lynn
written.
Bousman, who directed this, did Saw 2, 3, and 4 as
Yeah,
well.
so everything was on the table that for me to believe they had something, right? We're not in a Jigsaw situation where we're like, okay, you said you had something, but you didn't really. Um, I don't understand why, at the end of the day, why this film was made, other than to make money, obviously.
Yeah, and to tap Chris Rock, who, touted himself, and I'm not saying this isn't true, but as a huge fan of the franchise, and he had an idea that he said,
Hmm.
like, this movie needs to be made. I just don't see that idea play out on screen here.
Not at
I,
all.
I'm totally fine with the messaging they have, but when I think you have an idea for a Saw movie, I'm thinking, okay, like, what's the reinvigoration here? Because going after corrupt cops, very noble, but Jigsaw's been doing that for 5 films.
Hmm.
Or Hoffman has. I mean, he's corrupted in and of himself, but he's been fighting corruption in the police force. He kills that guy who killed his sister and got off
Yeah.
trial. It's like this isn't. If anything, this is the playbook that Saw's been following. So reintroducing it and putting Saw in the title to get me in the theater. I don't want to say it's a bait and switch. That feels too harsh because it was a good movie, but to me, like, how is this fresh blood in the Saw franchise? I don't
And
really.
you made a comment to me off pod, I think really was perfect. It was about Cloverfield Paradox. It was, like you said, you can say it better than me. It was an idea that they had for a film, a plot, and then they just really didn't know what to do with it. And so they just tagged on a franchise that already existed to make it work, right? Like, this was a movie inherently that for a while didn't feel like a Saw film, that just added traps. And then all of a sudden they're like, hey, let's just make this a Saw film and we'll get more money from it. And then it just worked out. I don't know that you can tell I say more eloquently, but it made so much sense.
Yeah, I mean, I think there's a lot here in terms of a script and world building. I just don't think it's a Saw movie. And the only issue I really have with that is when you use that as your marketing tactic, there is a level of expectation when people come in the theaters that it's going to check a certain number of boxes. Now, having said that, we wanted new blood in the franchise. And I guess if you look at it from that perspective, it sort of is that, but it doesn't even really feel like Saw adjacent. Like even the references to John Kramer and Shank's
Felt
explanation.
force.
Yeah, his explanation of the spiral, I was like, dude, that's so weak. That one line he had, he's like, it all leads to this in the middle. I'm like, what? What are you talking
They're like,
about?
we got to get one line in here that references why
Right.
this movie's called Spiral.
And I guess the other thing too, with 30 minutes left, when they show Shank's, body, and we're to assume, he's been killed by the Jigsaw killer. I think the other problem, and Ronnie, maybe you can correct me if I'm wrong here. I was sort of thinking like, there's no one else it could be besides him. Like, to sort of build suspense on the twist, I'm like, there's no one else it is. He just disappears for the third act, and he shows back up pretty
The
obviously.
thing is, and exactly, like they didn't need to do that. By showing him that he got killed made us more suspicious that he was the one.
Totally agree.
They could have just not killed his character. They could have just made it where Chris Rock at the end, they were both doing their thing, right? Like they just got separated. That would have been less telling to me. Or
100%.
having Shank be Zep. That I think would have been great. If it's just like in Saw 1, you think Zep is the bad guy, and then at the very end, you find out he had a tape and that there was someone else pulling the strings. And so it wasn't really Shank the whole time. He was being forced at the end to do something. But they just didn't. Like they could have done one or two things that would have made the ending better. And it just felt like they had the easy where were the producers, where were the script writers being like, this is really obvious, right? Like, am I crazy? No one said that in the room.
Plus, Saw has a pretty smart fan base. Like even just seeing from the Reddit community and some of the ways that like I remember all the speculation after Saw 3 had to continue the franchise. And you and I were reading theories on the IMDb message boards like, dude, this actually sounds really fucking cool if they do. Like people had some awesome ideas. So
Yeah.
I know it's a tough expectation to live up to, but when you put Saw, on the title of a film, like you have to have some sort of a plot device that is going to subvert expectations in some way. And this is a good film, and we'll get into this in a
Yeah.
second, rewatchability, but I feel like this movie comes out 3 times a year.
Exactly. And how good would it have been okay, maybe this is just because I've come up with this idea. If Shank's tape was on there like Agent Shank at the very end, it's like your whole life has been about a revenge instead of living and progressing your life. Like you've been
Yeah.
doing this and hurting others. And I'm like, that would have been I
And
I
that
don't
could have
understand.
been Dr. Gordon or someone,
Yeah, or something. Even if it was, I'm just like that would have showed that they tried something. Um, but yeah, so if you want to go ahead and lead that into the next
Yeah, so the
rewatchability.
last thing is rewatchability, and it's interesting with the Saw movies. We talked about this on our Saw 5 commentary. When you know the end game of the film, it's always nice to go back and watch like the breadcrumbs that were laid for us. This movie, I feel like I picked up on a lot of them earlier, and I'm not touting myself for that. I'm just saying I don't know if I'll gain as much from rewatchability. So, Cycling, I
Hmm.
have sort of a threefold question here for you. Number one, would you recommend this film to someone who is a Saw fan? Number two, how excited or will you rewatch it? And then I guess number three, do you feel like this is a part of the Saw franchise? Like when you go, if you were to be a completist, watch all the Saw movies, would you include this in it?
So I would say the first one is, if you're recommending to a Saw fan, I feel like a Saw fan will see this movie because Saw fans, we are pretty loyal in the fact that we've seen some shitty movies, but we still enjoy it, right? Like we're clearly not above going to a film like this. So I
Hmm.
think for a Saw fan, you would have no problem recommending it too because again, you've gone through 8 of them. So to a casual viewer who maybe only saw like we know so many people who have only seen Saw 1 or 2, right? Like and then stopped. It might be a fun reintroduction for them because it's Chris Rock and Samuel L. Jackson. They don't maybe have the connections that you and I have to the film franchise, and I feel like they might actually genuinely enjoy it more because it's a highly produced, better, well-made film, like
I
written
agree.
well. So I think I would recommend it for the most part. But anyone who I think is like, I would just give them some expectations. And to the what was the second?
I was going to say, basically for rewatchability, is this
Yeah,
something that you think you'll pick up on new things when you go back and
this is
rewatch
the
it?
hardest part because every Saw film, and I think I rewatched Jigsaw for the first time ever since it came out, like a month ago. Is kind of how I felt about that one. Um, you said the breadcrumbs. You were exactly right. They weren't breadcrumbs. They were fucking like they were so obvious in this film. I
Yeah.
didn't feel like immediately like wow, I need to go. All of the films essentially, I wanted to go back and be like, what did I miss? I didn't miss anything at all. Like it was just so in your face. And anything there was just and they threw so many red herrings there. Like maybe that's where they thought they were being creative. I'm sure I will rewatch this. I'm sure you and I obviously will do a commentary on this one day.
Hmm.
I'm sure you and I probably may even watch it in theaters just for fun. But I just genuinely don't feel like I'm going to learn anything by rewatching this film.
Yeah, and then the last part, as a Saw completist,
Yeah.
I guess, how distant do you feel like this is from the franchise, or do you feel like it is? I mean, in terms of competent filmmaking, it might be,
The
the high. Like,
best.
if you
Yeah,
recommend this to a non-Saw fan, I think they'll love it.
exactly. I put this with the category of Jigsaw. I'm like, okay, I mean, I guess they're related. I mean, but it's not really, to me, the Jigsaw story is over.
Hmm.
They can keep doing this and I'll probably keep giving them $10 to go see it, but I don't think they can do that anymore. I think we had a Saw movies. It was genuinely 1 through 7, and I think it peaked at the Saw first four are in its own category. Saw 5 through 7 are in its own category, and then you have Jigsaw and Spiral. So what about you on all those?
Yeah, I agree. I'd like to think like if Saw 1 and 2 were to get married, they would invite Spiral, but maybe not give it a +1 to the wedding. Like it can come and show up, but it's
That
not like
was that was
that.
nice. I
Yeah,
like that.
it's not like that good of friends with them where like they're gonna pay, $185 for the plate of its date.
But then what if it like meets Jigsaw there and they're just like, oh God.
They would hook up in like the
Put them
Coke
at two
closet.
different tables.
Yeah, don't let them interact with each other. But yeah, I think like again, if you're not a Saw head or like not a huge diehard fan of the franchise, I think you will get a lot out of this movie. I think you'll have fun with it. You might not see the twist coming because you won't know. Like the problem with Saw fans when we watch this, we are looking every detail in the movie, all the minutia. I pay extra attention to because you know that everything in a scene, whether it's a photo in the background or an offhanded line, like when Shank mentions why he joined the Force, it could end up being sort of the fulcrum that the whole plot hinges on. And sure, we ruin the movie for ourselves in some ways, but also like it's made it hard for us to be surprised since Saw 4. And it's kind of crazy when you go back through the franchise. I enjoy them on different levels, but have we had a good, or I guess maybe great Saw movie since Saw 4? I mean, it's been like 15 years, right?
Yeah, and I think I've said that I actually have found myself to enjoy Saw 5 and 6 especially in my rewatches, but they're not Saw 1, right? Like they're not these great films.
Yeah. And with all these things, and I get it, it's just the way of Hollywood, and I'm not complaining about it or naive at all, but sort of like on much different levels, but like the Nightmare Before, or stars me, Nightmare on Elm Street and
Hmm.
Friday the 13th, as the franchise gets bigger and bigger in its entries, people look at it on the surface and it's important to articulate like guys, the first four Saw movies are fucking incredible. Like
Yeah.
even though the entries vary in quality after that, don't lose sight of that. And I think this is a good film. Like if you watch it outside of the Saw franchise, I think you'll really enjoy it. But as a Saw fan, I don't really feel the connection to it as I
And
did.
and maybe that was their point. Maybe this, you and I were what, 15, 16, I don't know when the first Saw came out. What if the teenagers right now, right? Like the people who probably didn't see the Saw movies because they were 4 years old when it came out. If this was their first, there's going to be a lot of people I think this is their first Saw movie.
Hmm.
You
And
know,
I saw a little bit of this too. I think the reception online is very positive to this
I was
film
surprised.
from
There
what I've
was
seen.
more positive than I thought it was going to be shit on after I got out of the theater. I went to Reddit and the first comment was like, "What a film! This is amazing! What a twist!" I was like, "What?" But then there were other people like us, so it made me feel better about
Yeah,
myself. But
which is
if
good.
this is
Like
your
I don't want anybody to like hate. I mean, I want everybody to enjoy the movies when they go. I didn't get
absolutely
as much out of it as some other people, but good for them. I'm
good for,
definitely not
yeah,
gonna shit
I
on it.
will love if there's 15-year-old, 20-year-olds seeing this movie being like, "Oh, I enjoyed it," and then go back to Saw 1 because like I said, I really feel like there's a lot of people who may be reintroduced to an amazing franchise.
Yeah, and I was also just glad to be back in the theaters and seeing a film that I was anticipating. That was just like a really fun thing to do and sort of
First
get
movie
that
for me for a year and a half, I think. My last
same.
movie in theaters, I think, was uh, Rise of Skywalker.
Oh my God, poor thing.
Two really underwhelming experiences
Jesus
in the movie
Christ.
theater.
That's a horror film in and of itself in a whole
Yeah.
different way. All right, Cycly, anything you want to leave the people on with our review of
I,
Spiral?
I guess I'll say I wanted to get I had sorry one question for you was do you think they can make another one? Because I think
do.
it's obvious that, I don't know.
I do. You know what I actually wouldn't mind is we can leave this story in and of itself, come up with a different title, and say from the Book of Saw, almost like some anthology movies that have
Mhm.
loose connections to the Jigsaw Killer. I would be kind of into that. I mean, throw a bunch of shit against the wall, see what sticks. Get new creative minds in. If you have an idea that you think you can tie in, I'll give you a chance. I'm. I mean, we're so loyal to this franchise. I wasn't like pumped about this movie, but I wasn't like super let down. If they come out with another one in 2 years, I'll still be there and probably be
Yeah,
super
you
excited
and
to
I
watch
have
it.
been consistent in that. Really quickly, my thought initially was like, this makes no sense. Chris Rock knows it's Shank. Shank is alive. Like like what's the plot of the second one? But then I thought, in Saw 2, we know it's John Kramer. The police know it's John Kramer. He's in a room with John Kramer the entire time.
Yeah.
So then I was like, well, I guess it could work. I guess it could work theoretically if they kept Shank as the new Saw. So we'll see.
I just don't want them to go down the line of like six apprentices later. We're trying to extend these movies. And it's like, oh, also this guy was working with him.
And
But I
for some
wouldn't.
reason, we'll still be paying the money to go
I
see it.
know. I will. We're sick. We need help. The Jigsaw should put us in a trap and be like, you continue to see these movies on opening night. That is your weakness.
It's like we keep testing you with horrible movies, and you keep showing up.
Like you're right, John. Absolutely right.
I'm guilty.
All right, for our legal counsel, Ronnie Cycli, I'm the mayor, Jeff Hornacek, and we are the Bro Force Squad podcast. Thank you guys so much for checking us out. Follow us on Twitter at Bro Force Squad. Find us on YouTube, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, iHeartRadio. Just type in Bro Force Squad as 3 separate words. Pretty much anywhere you'll find us. And check out everything that we post on our website, broforcesquad.com. Till next time, Cycli and I just got this weird tape that said play me, so... I did like when he put the USB in Shank's computer. He's like, I'm not going to fuck up my work computer.
That was I thought that was perfect. That's like actually something a cop would say. Like, I'm gonna put that in there.
It'd be funny if
Oh,
because
man.
Shank made it, if it was like, oh, welcome back. Like when he put the USB in, he's like, what the fuck does that mean? I don't know.
This device has already been paired. You're like, what? What? This is shit.